Hello and welcome to the Game of Gymnastics podcast. My entire career, and especially over the last few competitions, I've asked the question to myself mostly, am I actually good enough? It's a topic I've touched on in other episodes, but I wanted to focus on it here because it's very common within gymnastics and sport as a whole to feel insignificant or inadequate in the context of your sport, and because sport defines most of our lives as a person as well. When this happens and these feelings come about, it's easy to get lost in them. I'll talk about my process when I have these feelings and thoughts like this in real time and potentially overshare slightly for the sake of content. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so first I'll go over the context. Something slightly amusing, I suppose. In a recent episode, I actually put in the thumbnail as a little nod to false white gaming. How good am I actually? And in essence, that was me asking this question of, am I actually good enough? In essence, to answer this question, you need to know a few things. Firstly, what are you asking? Are you asking, am I good enough to do certain things right now? Or are you asking, am I good enough to potentially in the future reach a certain goal? So you need to know where your parameters are. You also need to be able to look at your performances and training objectively. You need to have a breadth of information, both in terms of scores and in terms of potential start scores and execution scores that you've had over the years, as well as generic consistency sort of levels. But I should give some context first for why I'm talking about this, as opposed to just talking about it. So over the last few competitions, I've struggled with performing well, with doing the things that I want to do and not doing how I felt I'd prepared for the competition, because I felt like I'd done enough in preparation and then I failed. And then I did more in preparation for the next competition and then I still failed. So it's a constant struggle of feeling like I'm not putting out what I am capable of. And that's becoming an issue in my gymnastics, or at least mentally it is. And when I talk about this issue of having training not meeting my performances, or no, performances not meeting my training, and the levels that I was training at, I'm mostly talking about the British here, but I'm also talking in broader terms in terms of the Welsh and the English as well. The Welsh was the first competition of the year, so I can chalk it up to that and I can say that that was the issue. But in reality, I felt like I'd done enough in preparation to be at least semi-prepared for it. So it was a struggle to get out there and feel relatively confident, but not put out what I know I could. And it was a similar sort of story in the English as well, where I felt like I'd done enough at least. It was 2 weeks after the Welsh. I'd dusted myself off. I'd done more in the preparation, but it still wasn't enough. But of course, with this, you have to focus on the context as well. The context, not just of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about not feeling like I've done what I prepared, but also in terms of the context of the preparation itself. I'd recovered from the ankle surgery. I'd done a lot of, I hadn't done a huge block of work to prepare for these routines. The issue was that these routines, the skills in the routines, I'd been doing for years. Like, I'd done every single one of these skills. I'd competed every single one of these skills before, other than the double offerings of the British. I'd competed every single one of those skills before, so I knew I was physically capable of doing it. So in essence, it's less a case of I'd felt amazingly prepared for those competitions at a specific time. It was more that I had prepared, like I'd got the fitness, but I also knew I could do the skills well before the preparation in the first place, which is, I think, what helped me get to the point of routine fitness in the first place. Like, I would never have been able to put these routines out there if I was doing skills that were that were new for me. Like, if I'd tried to put giant makuts into P-bus, if I'd tried to put anything, basically any upgrades in beyond just the double offerings, because I'd felt ready for that long before. It's just that my shoulder didn't allow me to compete previously. So every single one of these skills I was prepared for. So I think that was the majority of the reason why I felt disappointed with the performance, because I had the fitness and I knew I could do the skills. So when you're in a position like that and you don't end up performing, you end up asking yourself the question of what's wrong with me? am I just not good enough? Am I not cut out for performing? And of course, you also need to ask what good enough actually means, which was one of the points I said previously. What is good enough in my mind or your mind, depending on who you are, what sort of sport you're doing, what goals you're trying to achieve? Good enough for me would be good enough to make the Commonwealth Games team, to make the Europeans, basically a major, a senior major. That's the big goal, realistically. And I don't know if it will end up going to things like World's Olympics, but if it makes it there, that's amazing. The next goal for me is a senior international. I've been selected for senior internationals, but I've never actually been in the position where I've competed in a senior international for reasons that were relatively out of my control. I say relatively because it was injuries that I sustained. I had a broken ankle in 2024, and then I dislocated my ankle in 2025. There wasn't a huge amount I could do after the fact. Like, it was incredibly disappointing when I got to those sort of competitions and I couldn't compete. Well, I didn't get to the competitions because I did it well before I actually competed. But I'm now thinking to myself, obviously, because brains are weird, what if I never get the chance to compete internationally? Like, what if those two were my only chances and I blew them? What if this is like a curse in my mind where I can never compete internationally again? I can never compete internationally as a senior. Because I competed internationally as a junior. Some of you may know, went to Junior Worlds 2023, and I had an amazing competition. But the question is, does that translate to being able to compete internationally as a senior? Potentially not. I know that, I mean, physically, mentally, I have the ability to compete. I have the ability to compete internationally because I know I've done it before. It was as a junior. It's different, and there are different expectations, and there are different outcomes, and there are different routines. They're easier routines, so maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe you just haven't found my swing yet, because realistically, it took me a very long time as a junior to get to the point of feeling comfortable and being able to compete properly. Like, it was only at the age of 18 where I finally actually found my stride and got into the swing of things, and it was only for a brief moment as well. So there are so many things that you need to sort of understand, and the things that you need to take into account when you're talking about what your potential is. You can find the positives and the negatives in this. You can look at where you are good enough, and you can look at where you need to improve. But it's not where you're not good enough, it's where you're yet to improve on. Like, you may be actively improving on it, but it's still got a way to go. And that's a better way of looking at it, as opposed to, I'm not good enough and I'm never going to be good enough. Realistically, the best thing about me as a performer when it came to Junior Worlds was my consistency. So I just need to find that again. But where I am good enough is I've got skills, I've got the ability to put them into routines, and I've got the ability to do the routines. It's just about consistency of performance and consistency of mindset. Like, I'm trying to put new stuff into the routines. I'm trying to do more and upgrade still, because there's no point in stagnating. There's no point in working on just the skills I've already got. One of which I mentioned previously, was the giant makuts. So that's something that I'm planning on putting in for British teams. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it's something that I'm planning on putting forward just so I've actually got something to show that I'm improving. Something that you might be able to do when it comes to trying to look at what you need to do in the future is look at what the top guys are doing, and also look at what you'd have done in the past that has worked for you. Because it's one thing to know what other people are doing and what works for them, but to be able to look introspectively and see, okay, well, this has worked for me at this time. Like, for me, it would be, this worked to Junior Worlds. I just did a huge block of work. I was relatively injury free in that time, smashed the English, so I had a good comp before. Like, so I had a prep competition at the Scottish. I did a really good comp at the English. I had another big block of work, like a 4-week block of work for the Junior Worlds. And then I had routines that I found easy. So that worked for me. And it's how do I get to that point again? It's making these routines feel easy for me. It's just doing numbers, numbers, numbers. It's being able to know every single time I'm going to put those releases on the bar every single time. I'm going to land those dismounts every single time. And that's what some of these people do so well. So Joe Fraser, he does so much, like he puts so much into it, like less so at the moment because he's got a business now and he's putting hours and hours of work into things other than gymnastics now. But he's done so much of the work already. He's got the skills. He knows he can put them on the bar or the P bars or whatever it is. And he's still putting work in. He's still grinding, putting numbers in, getting routines done and preparing himself for the competitions that he's doing. So this can sometimes be a trap that people will fall into, but you need to be able to look at these people, look at where they're at and go, okay, they're there, I'm here. A, how far is it to get from here to there? B, how can I get there? Instead of, my God, they're there, I'm here. That's such a long way because everyone's different and everyone progresses at different rates. Like I said, as a junior, I only peaked when I was 18, which is by a lot of definitions, not a junior. So you can't put too much pressure on yourself, but being able to see what your strengths are, see what your weaknesses are and work specifically on the weaknesses is quite useful as opposed to thinking, God, my weaknesses are really bad and it's going to drag me down. Like I can think that about my pommels, for example, because they're being quite harsh on pommel. It's not a bad thing. It's just what they're doing now. So I need to work on my shape of the circle and how I'm going to put everything on the pommel every single time well, because I've had the consistency before, which means that I may not be able to get it exactly the same, but I can get to a similar point again. If you've done it before, you know you can do it again realistically because you've got the same body. It may be more difficult. You may have to find a different sort of way of doing it, but you'll find a way of doing it. So you need to look at difficulty, to look at execution. You need to look at hit rate, as it were. You need to look at what percentage of the time people are hitting the routines that they need to be hitting. What percentage of the time will people know that they'll be on and off the bar clean every time, on and off P bars clean every single time, staying on their feet, landing tumbles well on the floor. What are people doing in routines? And what are they doing in training to influence that? At the end of the day, you may feel like you're failing every single routine. You're falling on everything. But if you actually look at it, like really look at it, how many skills you're actually falling on per competition? How many skills are you therefore putting on? What's the percentage of skills fallen on versus skills made? Because realistically, it's going to be very high. It's only a few margins that actually make a difference. Yes, people like Joe, he could have fallen 3 times and he still would have won. But you're looking at people who have mastered gymnastics realistically. There was a time where people like him would have been at the bottom of the run and they wouldn't have felt like they could progress. Everyone has these sorts of setbacks. Everyone has these difficulties. I mean, I assume it will be last week, but I think it will be my latest episode that I did was with Joe Fishburne. He's had some real bad times that have happened to him, but he's always gone out of it and he's always gone better from it. And the phrase he uses is adversity is my superpower. He explains it quite well on that episode, so I'll link it. But if you want to hear from someone who's been at the bottom and came out on top, he's a good person to listen to. Another thing that can also help, though, might be adding context to the mistakes that you make. Why did things go wrong? What can you do to change that next time? Because often it can be random stuff. Like it can be things just happen in competition, like issues do sometimes just crop up, like with my helium but sometimes things do just happen, but then sometimes there is a reason behind things and you haven't done the right action on high bar. You're fractionally off, like a little bit early or a little bit late. Like with my shoulder catch up, I was just a tiny bit late. Maybe I needed to straighten my arms a tiny bit more and then I would have been on the bar and full stretch and it would have been great. Maybe it's like on floor for me, where I just kicked out a little bit early. I just hadn't done the numbers of the full twist double front to know that I was going to get around. If I'd tucked in just a tiny bit longer, maybe it's things like that. And if you look at it that way, it's just tucking in a bit longer. Like the only falls I had were tucking in a bit longer on my double front, not taking an extra swing on a Healy, which I've never done before in a competition, and going a tiny bit earlier on a shoulder catch-up. That's not much. In an entire competition, in a 3-hour competition, those were the only 3 major mistakes. Those were the only major mistakes in 8 routines and apparatus plus 1 vault, just 1 for vault. So 41 skills. 41 skills, 3 mistakes. So it's approximately just over 1/14. So every 14 skills approximately I made one mistake, which isn't great, but in the context of things, in the progression of things, that's okay, because that means that it's moving in the right direction. It's better than it was at Welsh, and arguably, I think, better than English as well. The issues themselves weren't huge either. So maybe it's an issue of reframing. Maybe it's not saying I'm not good enough, I didn't do good enough. It's instead saying these were tiny mistakes. I just need to iron out the details, gain a bit more consistency, a bit more confidence when I'm competing, but I'll get there. I'm not consistent enough yet. Or it's I'm not putting enough difficulty out yet, or I'm not executing it well enough yet. But all of these phrases, one word at the end, which imply that you're going to do something about it, that you're going to make a change. And that's the important bit. The fact that you actually action it, the fact that you're actually doing something about it. Because sometimes when you make these mistakes and you are in these positions, you can feel so powerless. You can feel like, I can't do anything about this. Like, maybe this is just how I am. If it's how you are, you can't change it. But if it's just something that you're doing, you can change that. It's still difficult. It still won't be easy. But I think anyone who's in this game knows that you're not in it because it's easy. It's not easy. But at the end of the day, it's not going to happen if you don't action it, and you're not going to be able to action it if you don't know what you're doing. So have a plan, then action it, and things will improve. But it's also knowing that it might not be immediate. It might not change straight away. This is a very, very difficult sport, and things will get in the way constantly. It's difficult. But once you've been able to look at things properly and reevaluate, reassess what's actually happening, you'll see that A, you're not as far away as you once thought, and B, you can actually do something about it. If you've done something about it before, especially. If you've done something about it before, you have a clear plan. It's just what you did before. If you haven't, maybe look up other people for inspiration, but use something that's worked for you in the past as well. Many of you, either gymnasts or just anyone watching really, or listening, may have had these issues. You may be a gymnast yourself who's had bad competitions. You may be a gymnast who's training and struggling to improve that way, who's just can't seem to get certain skills, or a gymnast who is having a hard time outside of the gym. Things get better. All times pass, good times pass, and bad times pass. So what I would encourage you to do is just focus on what matters, focus on the things that you can improve as opposed to the outside factors that you can't control. What you can control is what you're going to do about things and what you're going to do to better yourself as a gymnast, as a person, as an athlete. But let's go back to the question, am I actually good enough? And in essence, the answer is no, but in actuality, it's not yet. I've not put myself in the best position yet. I've not done the preparation that I need to be able to do a good competition yet. I've not done a senior international yet. But despite all the feelings and all the thoughts and the worries and the doubts, it doesn't mean I won't be. Doesn't mean I won't be ready. Doesn't mean I won't be good enough. Doesn't mean I won't be able to make these teams and the selections and the scores and the medals and the finals, all of those sorts of things, all of those dreams and goals, they're all attainable. Just because it doesn't seem like you're on the right path yet doesn't mean you're not. And I know this has been a very different type of episode, and I do apologize for that. I realized that recently my head's been in a very weird place. In terms of the podcast, in terms of my gymnastics as a whole, which I think you may think makes sense. You may not, and you're entitled to your opinion, but I hope you've enjoyed. And if there's anything you want to hear about, if you want to hear more about a certain topic, or you want to hear from a certain person, then do let me know. You can leave a comment, you can leave a review, you can send me a message. If you want to hear something, let me know. But that's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Game of Gymnastics podcast. Leave a like below if you've enjoyed, and follow for more. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.